Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. Pakistan launches strikes on multiple Indian bases, including a missile storage site in the north. Islamabad says the operation comes in response to escalating attacks, marking the region's deadliest flare-up in decades. Secretary of State Marco Rubio offers US help to launch direct talks between India and Pakistan, urging de-escalation after 4 days of cross-border firing. The G7 backs diplomacy too, condemning the Kashmir attack and calling for maximum restraint from both sides. French President Macron, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer and German Chancellor Merz arrive in Kiev by train to show solidarity with Ukraine. They will meet President Zelensky alongside Polish Premier Donald Tusk. Iran agrees to a fourth round of nuclear talks with the US this Sunday in Oman, with Tehran saying negotiations are advancing. Trump warns he may strike Iran if no deal is reached to end the long-standing dispute. The US confirms a new Gaza aid system using private firms and armed contractors to deliver supplies as Israel's blockade hits 3 months. Israel will secure the perimeter but won't distribute aid, a plan UN agencies slam for weaponizing humanitarian relief. Trump says an 80% tariff on Chinese imports seems right, marking a shift ahead of critical US-China trade talks in Switzerland. Top US and Chinese officials prepare to meet as the trade war continues to roil global supply chains. Kim Jong-un defends North Korea's involvement in the Russia-Ukraine war, calling it a sovereign right to defend a brother nation. He hails soldiers who participated in the Kursk operation as heroes and representatives of the nation's honor. 11 Ecuadorian soldiers are killed in a deadly ambush by the Border Command Group during an operation against illegal mining. The attack in the Alto Punio region involved explosives, grenades and rifles, according to military officials. During a joint briefing by the Indian Ministry of External Affairs and the MOD, Colonel Sophia Quasheri accused Pakistan of misusing international air routes by using civilian flights as shield. She stressed that such actions forced Indian air defense to exercise restraint while protecting civilian lives. Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri dismissed Pakistan's allegations as ludicrous, asserting that no missiles were fired at any religious site. Meanwhile, CDS General Anil Chauhan has briefed Defence Minister Ranjit Singh on the ongoing India-Pakistan conflict. We move on now. In a potential turning point in US-China trade relations, President Trump is now floating the idea of slashing tariffs on Chinese goods from a staggering 145% down to 80%. Posting on Truth Social, Trump said 80% tariff on China seems right, leaving the final call to Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. That message came just hours before top-level US-China talks are set to begin this weekend in Geneva. Let's listen in.
You are going to always have a baseline. I mean, there could be an exception at some point. We'll see. You know, somebody does something exceptional for us. That's always possible. But basically, you have a baseline of a minimum of 10%, and some of them will be much higher, 40%, 50%, 60%, as they've been doing to us over the years. We had a wonderful deal yesterday. We have 4 or 5 other deals coming immediately. We have many deals coming down the line, and ultimately we're just signing the rest of them in. But we always have a baseline of 10. You know, I'm very friendly with President Xi. I have great respect for him and for China, but we can't continue to allow them to do what they did. When I was president, they paid hundreds of billions of dollars in tariffs and taxes. and then Biden screwed it all up. What he did to this country between the border and between all of the other problems, the wars, everything, what he did to this country should never be forgotten. But one of the things he did is the trade was so bad and so imbalanced. So I think we're going to come back with a fair deal for both China and us.
Have you given Besant a number of how low you're willing to go?
Yeah, I am.
Are you
What's
willing
the
to
number?
share that number?
No.
80%?
But I put out a number today, 80%, so we'll see how that all.
Trump's remarks come amid signs the administration is softening its stance. On Thursday, the president struck a trade agreement with the UK, his first since announcing reciprocal tariffs on major trading partners in early April. He added that many more trade deals are in the hopper, with over 20 reportedly close to completion. Still, the White House insists any tariff cuts on China won't be unilateral. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt stressed that China must also make concessions. Let's listen in to what the press secretary had to say on the matter.
The president still remains with his position that he is not going to unilaterally bring down tariffs on China. We need to see concessions from them as well. And again, that's part of the reason that Secretary Besant is going to talk to his Chinese counterparts this weekend to start those discussions in person. As for the 80% number, that was a number the president threw out there, and we'll see what happens this weekend. And always in the effort of transparency, I'm sure you'll hear directly from the Treasury Secretary or the president after those negotiations can.
The talks in Geneva will be led by Besant and US Trade Representative Jamieson Greer, alongside China's Vice Premier He Lifang. This marks the first official engagement since China slapped 125 retaliatory tariffs on US goods, effectively triggering a trade standoff. Trump has sent mixed signals throughout the week. On Wednesday, he said tariffs would stay. By Thursday, he hinted the 145% rate was coming down. Now he's suggesting an 80% rate could be the starting point. And he's not backing off entirely. Trump says a 10% base tariff will remain on all imports, even after future deals are made. All eyes are now on Geneva. A deal with China could ease pressure on global markets and offer relief to American businesses and to consumers. We are joined by Dr. Jayjit Bhattacharya, President of the CDEPR, to discuss this in more detail. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Bhattacharya. Who has the cards in these trade talks going on in Geneva, Switzerland this weekend? Obviously, both have launched a trade war with these tariffs escalating one after the other. But who holds all the cards?
The global trade is highly interrelated. If one entity claims that they have more cards than the other, that's a fallacy. Trying to leverage what they believe are exclusive cards in their hand is going to disrupt global trade, which will come back and bite them. So in a way, the question could be rephrased as to who has the ability to bear more pain from a trade perspective and give more pain to their people. That's really the question. And obviously, regimes which are democratic in nature, which have free information flow or relatively freer information flow in today's age and world, will find it a little more challenging to hold on to their positions, given that there will be a quick backlash from their population and from their citizens. So in that sense, democratic nations always have less ability to leverage and to have, in your words, cards to be held in hand, because there will be a quick retribution from its citizens, and therefore the government has to fall in line with the demands of its citizens and its businesses.
Dr. Bhattacharya, obviously we saw the markets topple staggeringly during this whole process, especially during that first month. Is there any normality going to emerge from this, from prior to the tariffs? Are these, obviously we have no way of telling, but are these tariffs and is this trade war going to have the effect that President Trump wanted it to?
Of course, it will be a new normal. It will not be back to what it used to be. The question is, what will this new normal be? Will some manufacturing shift to US? Well, it will for sure. Will it be anything significant? That is something that most economists will not agree to. Most economists will not agree to the fact that there will be any significant increase in manufacturing in the US. That's not going to happen because of the fundamental underlying numbers, which is essentially what are the wage costs, what is the cost of manufacturing. Unless there is a large amount of robotics that goes into manufacturing, which again comes back to the point as to what's the point in doing manufacturing in US or in anywhere else, because it doesn't lead to jobs. So only thing that it leads to is the manufactured product. So as long as that manufactured product comes from anywhere else in the world at a lower cost, how does it matter? But if it involves jobs, it will not lead to a large number of jobs getting created in the US, and that's really what the challenge is. The second point is that there has been a fundamental erosion in the trust in the US-backed trade system and the US-backed currency system, which are greatly intertwined. That is going to have a significant debilitating effect on the US economy in the medium to long run.
Yes, and finally, Dr. Bhattacharya, we obviously saw yesterday the trade deal signed between the United States and the United Kingdom, the first deal to be, I would say, completed, but it's not completed yet. How can we take that as a case study? Donald Trump obviously displayed it as something amazing. He was very positive with his words about it. Was he right to be? Was it a win for both the United Kingdom and the United States, given that countries like India are still negotiating with a trade deal with them expected very soon as well?
It really depends on the details. As I say, the devil lies in the details. The trade deal is not available for public scrutiny as of now. Now, do keep in mind that the US government had kind of a gun on its head, because it had given a 90-day period in which it will bring back its tariffs. So in 90 days period, either it has to swallow its words or not have a deal in its hand. So any deal in whatever shape was critical for the US administration to show that its policies is bearing fruit, and it might lead to some benefits for the US people. Now, the point is, therefore, under such pressure, is the deal really beneficial for the US, or was it beneficial for the UK? That's the key point we need to look. And I think once the details of the text is out, one can then check whether it was really beneficial for the US, or was it mutually beneficial. It could also be a deal that was mutually beneficial, but we need to keep in mind that it was the US which was under pressure under these circumstances.
Dr. Bhattacharya, thank you very much for joining us. We now move over to Europe, where Europe rallies behind a special tribunal to prosecute President Putin for aggression against Ukraine, as ministers sign the Lviv statement. Here's what Ukrainian Prime Minister denies Shamyal and the EU Foreign Minister Policy Chief Kaja Kallas had to say.
Ухильно наближаємося до старту роботи спецтрибуналу для вищих посадових осіб Росії, які віддавали злочинні накази. Країни коаліції провели велику юридичну підготовку. Сьогодні буде прийнято політичне рішення про схвалення роботи цих юридичних команд. Сам процес формування і запуску спеціального трибуналу в межах
I'm very happy that we are here together with the European foreign ministers celebrating this European Day with you. It marks the day of peace, and of course this is what we want also for Ukraine. Our presence today marks the unity of an unwavering solidarity with Ukraine. If you stand for peace, you should stand here in Ukraine, not in Moscow today. Russia is still waging the most devastating war since 1945 here in Ukraine. 8 years ago, Hitler bombed Ukraine. Today, Putin is doing the same.
This comes as France, Germany, Poland and the UK arrive for a historic joint visit to Kiev, joining the US in pushing for a ceasefire. President Emmanuel Macron, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer and Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk will hold talks with Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky. The four leaders are calling for an immediate 30-day ceasefire in Ukraine and have vowed to ramp up pressure on Russia if it refuses. French President Emmanuel Macron also wants a joint US-Europe plan to enforce the truce with massive sanctions. Meanwhile, Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico defied EU warnings and met Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow. Fico said it was an honor to attend Russia's World War II memorial. He pledged to veto any EU energy embargo on Russia. Putin used the Moscow parade to draw parallels between Russia's war and the Soviet victory over Nazi Germany. He praised troops fighting in Ukraine and accused the West of Russophobia. Russia says it backs a 30-day ceasefire in Ukraine, but the Kremlin wants key conditions addressed first. Spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said the idea came from Ukraine and the US, but requires clarity on what a ceasefire means. Here's Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov.
Эта тема, она же давно бросалась украинской стороной, и, если вы знаете, тема перемирия, собственно, как только она была озвучена администрацией Трампа, она была поддержана президентом Путиным с оговоркой о том, что вокруг идеи перемирия существует огромное количество нюансов, не найдя ответа на которые предметно говорить очень сложно.
Meanwhile, President Putin praised Russian troops fighting in Ukraine at Moscow's World War II parade, attended by allies including China's Xi Jinping. In Washington, US President Donald Trump urged both leaders to end this stupid war. Here's what he said.
For both parties, get this war ended. We're losing 5,000 soldiers a week, Russian and Ukrainian soldiers, and other people also, by the way. And I say, get this stupid war finished. That's my message for both of them.
The White House also confirmed a productive call between Trump and Zelensky. The White House said both sides are in talks with hopes that a ceasefire deal could be reached soon. Here's what the White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said.
And yesterday, President Zelensky called the president to tell him that the critical minerals deal had passed the parliament in Ukraine. I talked to the president about that call. He said it was very good and productive. And of course, the critical minerals deal is great for Ukraine, but also, of course, for the United States of America and our taxpayers here. It was a good call. And they also spoke about, of course, this ceasefire that the president proposed, the 30-day ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine, which we know Europe is on board with, and we hope both countries will agree.
Let's turn to the Middle East now, where Washington's envoy to Israel, ahead of President Trump's Middle East visit, said that a US-backed Gaza aid mechanism will start soon. The plan bypasses a ceasefire and uses private companies, not Israel, to distribute food and essentials. Several partners have joined, but their names remain undisclosed. Ambassador Mike Huckabee said non-profit groups will help lead the effort. He stressed the goal is reaching 2 million people despite logistical hurdles. Here's Ambassador Huckabee's full statement.
Israelis are going to be involved in providing necessary military security because it is a war zone. But they will not be involved in the distribution of the food or even in the bringing of the food into Gaza. There are several partners who have already agreed to be a part of the effort. We're not prepared to name them as of yet because some of the details of their participation are being worked out. There's obviously, yes, there is a humanitarian crisis. That's why we need a humanitarian aid program going in.
UNICEF and others criticized the plan, warning it could worsen conditions and displacement. Israel denies aid over security fears, accusing Hamas of diverting supplies. Hamas slammed the sign as aligned with Israel's goals and warned against local cooperation. Trump is expected in Saudi Arabia, Qatar and the United Arab Emirates next week. He teased a major announcement, though it's unclear if this is it. Talks continue to secure a ceasefire and free the 59 hostages still held in Gaza. Israel demands Hamas disarm. Hamas offers a full release if Israel withdraws from Gaza. Over 52,000 Palestinians have died in the war, which began after Hamas's October the 7th attacks. Staying in the region, Israel's defense minister vowed retaliation after a missile fired from Yemen was intercepted near Jerusalem. Defense Minister Israel Katz blamed Iran and promised strikes in Yemen and wherever necessary, he said. The Houthis claimed the attack, saying they targeted Ben Gurion International Airport near Tel Aviv. Let's listen in to Yahya Sari, Houthi military spokesperson, claiming the strike.
نفذت القوة الصاروخية في القوات المسلحة اليمنية عملية عسكرية نوعية استهدفت مطار اللد المسمى إسرائيليا مطار بن غوريون في منطقة يافا المحتلة، وذلك بصاروخ باليستي فرط صوتي، وقد حقق هدفه بنجاح بفضل الله، وقد فشلت المنظومات الاعتراضية في التصدي له، وتسبب في هروع ملايين الصهاينة المحتلين إلى الملاجئ وتوقف حركة المطار قرابة الساعة.
The missile triggered sirens and explosions in several areas, delaying a flight from Cyprus. Airport operations resumed shortly after with no major disruptions. Last Sunday, a Houthi missile hit near the airport, injuring several people. In response, Israel struck Sana's airport and nearby power stations, disabling key infrastructure. That retaliation followed US airstrikes after Houthi threats to Red Sea shipping. Oman later brokered a US Houthi ceasefire to protect shipping lanes, but the Houthis declared they would continue attacks on Israel and Israeli-linked vessels. They claim solidarity with Palestinians amid the ongoing Israel-Hamas war. Israel and the US are closely watching for further escalations. The United States and Iran will resume nuclear talks Sunday in Oman, just before President Donald Trump begins his regional tour. Trump hopes to strike a deal with Iran to prevent an Israeli military attack that could lead to wider conflict. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said Oman proposed the date and both sides agreed. He said talks are progressing and moving into more detailed phases. Steve Witkoff, Trump's close ally and lead negotiator, will join this fourth round of discussions. A source said both direct and indirect talks are expected. Despite decades of hostility, officials have described a friendly atmosphere in previous rounds. However, key technical issues remain unresolved. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio insists Iran must end all uranium enrichment, even for peaceful purposes. Trump has expressed a preference for diplomacy over force, but said military action remains an option. Trump pulled out of the US, out of the Obama-era deal in his first term, demanding stricter terms. Iran's position has weakened after the fall of Syria's Assad and Israel's strikes on Hezbollah and Iranian targets. Despite negotiations, the US continues sanctions, recently targeting a Chinese refinery buying Iranian oil. We move back over to Europe now, where France and Poland signed a treaty yesterday to strengthen cooperation on defence, nuclear energy and military technologies, amid growing concerns over the US commitment to European security. The agreement, featuring a mutual assistance clause, deepens ties between the two NATO members, ensuring support in case of an attack. French President Macron and Polish Prime Minister Tusk emphasized the importance of this pact, especially in the light of US President Trump's uncertain stance on Europe's defense. Although the treaty does not directly mention access to France's nuclear deterrent, it includes provisions for nuclear energy cooperation. The signing, held in Nancy, marks a significant step in Poland's role on the European stage, highlighting its strategic position and increasing defense spending. This treaty is the first of its kind between France and a Central European country. Listen in to what the French President Emmanuel Macron has said about the treaty.
Avec ce traité, nous ouvrons une nouvelle page, celle par laquelle nous bâtissons une solidarité irréversible, une confiance bâti à travers les crises, et en particulier celle de ces dernières années, et une volonté d'assumer à l'égard de nos peuples et pour l'Europe le fait que de Brest à Cracovie, l'Europe se tient ensemble. Et ce traité d'amitié, c'est aussi ça. Nous sommes très fiers.
Let's now shift to Africa, where drone strikes have hit Port Sudan for 6 consecutive days, with the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces blamed for the attacks. Despite air defences intercepting some drones, the city, which has been a safe haven during Sudan's ongoing conflict, has seen significant damage. Key facilities, including the international airport, fuel depot and power station, have been struck. A recent drone attack in Atbara caused a fire at the power station, leading to widespread power outages. Port Sudan is crucial for humanitarian aid, but these strikes threaten to worsen the already dire situation. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres warned that the attacks would exacerbate the humanitarian crisis. Over 2 years of fighting between the army and the RSF have resulted in tens of thousands of deaths and displaced 13 million people, creating what the UN calls the world's worst humanitarian crisis. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world.